Hi, welcome to 14-day weather forecast. Lots of reports are starting to appear about the possibility of heavy snow. Is there any truth in them? Let's see. Here's the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday the 12th of November. And at the outset, there isn't any sign of snow at all, at least not across the United Kingdom, because it's high pressure dominating things, and that has been the case now for quite a long time. So it's dry, mostly quiet and settled. As I run this, what we see is not much changes in the short term, although high pressure becomes centered further west, and that has important ramifications for developments through the weekend, because a band of rain starts pushing southeastwards across the UK, and there is much colder Arctic air to its north. You can see lots of white shading up there indicating snow. I'm going to run this through to its conclusion, but flag up a big health warning, because it's important to remember that at this range, details are going to be very uncertain and there will be key differences between the various global computer models. This is just one scenario. Here we go. The cold air sinks southwards, snow showers in the north develop, heavy rain in the south as that area of low pressure deepens. But then, watch this, a nasty feature moves in from the Atlantic, pushes eastwards across the southern half of the UK, and it brings heavy outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow. That is just one scenario, but it does look like wintry conditions will be developing towards the end of the first week. But as I say, the details are up for grabs, and later on in this video I'm going to take a look at the snow risk in a little bit more detail. Here's the upper air temperature and jet stream sequence. To start off with, the UK here is under relatively mild upper level air, fairly close to the average. But as I run this, what we see is it doesn't change in the short term, that area of high pressure, but then the jet stream digs southwards through the second half of the week, and the blue shading, which indicates cold air aloft, remember these are forecast values at about 1,500 meters, sinks down across really all parts of the United Kingdom. It looks like it may start to become entrenched, at least over the north of the UK. What sort of conditions can we expect down at the surface? Well, just a few charts to illustrate things. So Wednesday the 13th, it's quiet at this point, it's dry, variable amounts of cloud, temperatures ranging from 9 to 12 C in the north, 12 to 13 perhaps in the south. Not a great deal changes by Friday. There could be a little bit of patchy overnight frost and fog through these first few days with the quiet anticyclonic conditions. But then as we head into the weekend, this is where the change happens. Outbreaks of rain start pushing southwards, and in the north it's turning colder there. And by Sunday there's heavy rain potentially being shown across England and Wales as that area of low pressure deepens. Cold conditions in the north, and everywhere really the temperatures are dropping. Into the first part of next week, so Monday, snow showers possibly in the northern half of the UK, mostly dry at this stage in southern and central regions, perhaps rain starting to push into the west. This is just before that area of low pressure moves in from the Atlantic, of course. Rainfall. I think these are quite instructive as well, because it's not just rain. On this update, it's precipitation, because there could well be snow around through the next 10 days or so. But the totals here from the ECM and GFS models for days 0 to 5 are pretty low. There are some differences there, but all in all, a lot of dry weather around. But moving forwards to the 0 to 10 day charts, look at this. The GFS on the right is showing up to 90 millimeters of precipitation through basically days 5 to 10 in southern and central regions. Conversely, very little precipitation in those areas according to the ECM, which is on the left, the wettest conditions being in the northwest and in Scotland generally according to the ECM. What that highlights really is the scenario which GFS is showing of areas of low pressure tracking eastwards across the southern half of the UK is not supported by the European ECM model. Therefore, not only would it mean those parts of the UK missing out on the heavy rain, it would also mean there wouldn't be any heavy snow, or indeed really any snow at all, unless it fell in the form of showers. So, in more general terms, how do the deterministic models compare to each other? Are they backing the GFS or the ECM? Here's the GFS, Tuesday the 19th. We've got that area of low pressure there tracking eastwards. The Canadian model at the same time, a little bit different but fairly similar really. It's got areas of low pressure coming in from the Atlantic, taking a southerly track, and they would indeed bring that risk of snow, possibly heavy snow, to southern and central regions. The German icon also has low pressure here, close to the south, the southwest. The ECM, though, as I've already hinted, is different. The cold air is moving downwards across all areas, but it looks like a more showery picture. I think there would be a lot of dry weather really in southern and central regions, with wintry showers there, mostly in the north. Finally, the UK Met global model also has the cold air pushing down across all areas, low pressure centre just to the east, and possibly maybe the hints for disturbance there, I think, to the west, but it's much closer to the ECM model. So the general theme towards the end of the first week is for quite a wintry pattern to be developing. The jet stream sinking southwards, the cold air moving down really across all regions, but some uncertainty about the timing of its arrival. Will there be more persistent outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow to contend with in southern and central areas? Well, that's a big uncertainty. I think on balance, until the UK Met and ECM models are backing that scenario, I wouldn't be going with it. So anyway, it is quite a wintry picture, that aside, and will that continue to be the case as we head through week 2? It's all about trends and probabilities, as I always say. Here's the 16-day GEFS plot for London. Across the top, 850 HPA temperatures. Across the bottom, precipitation. I'm not going to say the word rain anymore, at least not on this update, because there could be some sleet and snow. So across the top, what we see is upper air temperatures are below the average. The thick purple line is below the thick black line, so the ensemble mean below the 30-year norm. Although towards the end there it is creeping upwards, but there is a big spread, as you would normally anticipate. The individual runs are starting to show an increasingly wide range of solutions, but the key takeout is that through the first 5 days or so of the second week, it looks pretty cold. At least that's the biggest cluster of runs by quite a considerable margin. Does it mean snow for southern and central regions? Well, in the London area, what we see is the snow row across the bottom is reaching a maximum of 7 out of 33. And there are quite a few spikes there. So although those are precipitation spikes, it looks, according to this data, that it will be mostly rain which is falling in the London area. The ECM model I wanted to show as well, because this has some key differences to the GEFS. They're both from the same update this morning at the time of filming. But if we just take a step back with the GEFS, it has a cold air reaching the south of England, reaching the London area by around the 17th. But the ECM model keeps upper air temperatures above the norm until around the 19th, when they dip and then follow quite a similar pattern to the GEFS. So it just highlights the differences even in the ensemble models about the southwards progression of the cold air. ECM bringing it down to southern England a day or two later than the GEFS on average. 2 metre temperatures, back to the GEFS data using the data tables. This is for London, and lots of dark green there through the daytimes. Those are runs going between 1 and 5 Celsius, so it is a cold pattern which is being supported. Overnight lows across the bottom, dark greens there, but also a significant amount of blue, sub-zero temperatures. And as I've noted before, this is for London, so when you get a little bit further outside and for home counties, you could expect temperatures to be a tad lower, away from the urban heat island. The trend, though, towards the end of the week here is upwards. There's more yellow starting to appear across the top, less dark green. The overnight lows also ticking up. Manchester, it's actually a very, very similar pattern, but the snow row values along the bottom there are higher. They reach 14, so a significantly greater risk of snow here than in the London area. Plenty of spikes there, so there should be some precipitation around. I think it would indicate a mix really of rain, sleet and snow accumulations. Well, that's a different question. That's not what the snow row values indicate. They're just flagging up the possibility of snow actually falling. The 2-metre temperature data tables for Manchester follow very similar trends to the London ones at slightly lower levels. There's more dark green through the days, especially early on, and more blue on the overnight value, so more runs dipping down below freezing point, so greater risk of frost. Up to Glasgow, a very similar profile, although the suggestion here is that the cold air will be hanging on for longer. Nonetheless, towards the end of the second week, the trend there is upwards. In terms of rain spikes, at the start of the second week, similar really to Manchester, although the snow row values are actually slightly lower on one or two of those days, but I wouldn't necessarily read too much into that. The big picture here is consistent, and with the cold air coming down from the north rather than say from the east, it is likely to be Glasgow and locations in Scotland which bear the brunt of it and hang on to it for the longest. Here's the 2-metre temperature data table for Glasgow, and you can see on the overnight lows, lots of blue there. Most of the runs going sub-zero. Even through the days, a significant number are showing temperatures staying at or below 0 degrees Celsius. So it does look like a particularly cold spell of weather is possible, at least in the north. Rainfall through week 2, or precipitation. I said I wouldn't specifically refer to rainfall. These are the ECM probability charts showing the chance of 5 millimetres or more of water falling. So even if the snow falling, what this is doing is calculating the amount of water that there would be if that snow was melted. And they are quite interesting because you can see the highest risk is around really western, northern and eastern coastal counties, with inland areas having drier conditions, and that really suggests the likelihood of showery rain, I think, as opposed to the GFS model, which was bringing those more persistent outbreaks of precipitation across southern and central regions. Forwards to the following 3 days, a similar pattern is being displayed, although by day 13, the chart on the right, things becoming a little bit more diffuse, probably due to the number of scenarios increasing as we look further ahead, and different runs going for different outcomes. Very normal in an ensemble model. Here's the mean surface level pressure data table for York going through week 2. The trend is for pressure to be climbing later on. The oranges start to return. Those are between 1026, 1040 millibars, more yellow as well. And to start off with, there's lots of green, lots of blue and a bit of purple, low pressure dominated scenarios, but the amounts of those colours decreases towards the end. So I think it really ties in with the idea, at least, that GEFS is keen on bringing areas of low pressure in from the Atlantic, more so, as I've said, than maybe the ECM model is. Here's the GEFS mean surface level pressure plot for Friday, the 22nd of November, so it's averaging out all the individual runs in the model. A northerly flow across the UK, particularly there across the northern half, so that's where it's likely to be coldest. I think it's important to really bear that in mind. Although high pressure is well to the south on this, we've got fairly low surface level pressure values across all parts of the UK, so a changeable pattern, potentially a wintry one, the snow risk greatest in the north, but not discounted in the south either. Now, I wanted to say something a little bit more about the snow risk. I said I would come back to it, so here we go. It's very, very uncertain. This refers to the last few days of week 1 and the week 2 part of the forecast period. Taken on board in the south, conditions look marginal. In the north, it's often going to be colder, I would argue. So the risk of snow there is higher. But there's also uncertainty about the track of low pressure systems with the GFS, GEFS and the Canadian model as well, bringing in some quite nasty features across southern and central regions, which would have the hold out the possibility of bringing longer outbreaks of snow, also rain, of course, because of the marginal nature of it. So this is using data from the Canadian and GFS models. Don't pay too much attention to the dates on these. Don't, in fact, pay too much attention to the details. The reason I'm showing them is because they highlight the scenarios which those models are going for. Nasty areas of low pressure pushing across the southern half of the United Kingdom. The pink shading indicates the snow, so the snow on their northern edge. The blue shading there, the yellow and green shading is rain. And it's another thing to bear in mind here is that the area of snow with these features is usually very small. It's just along the boundary, their northern boundary, the western boundary perhaps as well. And if the system tracks just a tad further north, you're going to end up with rain in areas where you might have anticipated snow. Likewise, if it goes further south, the area of snow moves down with it. So that area being very small makes it virtually impossible for global models to pinpoint this type of thing, especially when looking this far ahead. It is just to try and get an idea of the pattern which they are going for. If they were right, here's a snow depth chart from the GFS model. Huge amounts of snow there in parts of southern England and southern Wales. I don't pay a great deal of attention to the GFS snow depth charts for the United Kingdom. I don't think it handles conditions here very well. We're often in a marginal setup where lots of snow melts as it hits the ground rather than accumulates. It can be very wet too, so there's much compression taking place and depths therefore are a lot lower than they would be in a colder and drier climate, for example, in Central Europe or parts of North America. But it's quite interesting to see it anyway. Of more note, really, I think, even though some of those shortcomings apply, are the snow depth charts from the GEFS, the ensemble, because they just indicate the number of runs in it which are going for snow to accumulate. And this is for Berkhamsted. I just thought I would jump outside London a little bit into the home counties. You can see there are some quite big spikes, one or two big spikes, indicating large amounts of snow associated with those low pressure systems. But all in all, I think we're about 5 or 6 out of 33 there going for accumulating snow. Up to Birmingham, similar, but the snow depths are lower. The risk of snow falling probably very similar. Up to Newcastle, and what we see here is the snow depths have fallen even more, although I think there are actually more runs which are going for accumulating snow. But in the GFS, GEFS world, I'll refer to it, what we're seeing is those low pressure areas tracking further south, so Newcastle probably to their north, away from the more persistent precipitation, up to Edinburgh. And now we're seeing the opposite effect occurring because there are more showers here. More of them are falling as snow and accumulations are becoming more likely again. Finally, this is for the Cairngorms. I'm just using it to illustrate what a very snowy snow depth chart looks like in the United Kingdom. Most of the runs there in the ensemble model going for significant accumulations of snow. I think that's probably good news for the skiers up in Scotland, perhaps an early start to the season. But as I say, I just wanted to show this more so that you can get a feel for what a very snowy snow depth chart appears like. Here's the Mogreps G snow depth forecasts for Wednesday the 20th. Mogreps G is a global ensemble run by the UK Met Office, and to me this looks a lot more realistic than some of those GFS charts. What we see is snow is most likely over high ground in Scotland, at least accumulations, and over high ground in northern England. A few of the runs are showing accumulations in the south, so it is not out of the question. It's a relatively low but not negligible risk. So I think, just to summarise, that's what I've said. Snow possible in the south, but the chance of heavy snow there is low, but not out of the question. So, to summarise the 2-week period, high pressure dominates early on, so it will be mostly dry with some patchy fog and frost likely. Then a band of rain pushes southwards with cold air following it into northern areas initially. There is some uncertainty about the timing, but it's probably going to be through the weekend. Beyond that, there is a chance of rain, sleet, snow and strong winds. Snow mostly in the north, but as I've been highlighting, a good deal of uncertainty about the details. And that continues to be the case as we head into week 2. On the whole, it looks like it's going to be cold and wintry, snow showers and frost in the north, some accumulations there, particularly over high ground. And there is that low but not negligible chance of more persistent snow affecting at least parts of southern Britain, but with conditions being very marginal. Even if the precipitation does come along in copious quantities, a good deal of it may well fall as rain or sleet. Towards the end of the second week, temperatures start to recover. So there we have it. I think a wintry scene developing, but a lot of uncertainty at this range about the extent of the snow risk, as I've been trying my best to highlight. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that it's very, very early in the season, so even in winter some of these synoptics would bring very marginal conditions. So in the second half of November, I wouldn't really be wanting to big up the risk of extensive snow too much. It's just quite a wintry scene on the whole. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. As ever, if you did, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. In that case, you'll not be missing any of my future updates. And also, I just wanted to mention that I'm hoping in the very near future to introduce some new video formats, so keep an eye out for them. Of course, with all this uncertainty inherent in the forecast for the next week or two, don't forget the best way of staying up to date with day-to-day developments is by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.